I'd like to acknowledge the original custodians of the land, their elders past, present and emerging. And I want to note that we've had an historic moment. The Victorian Parliament has become Australia's first to pass legislation around a framework for treaties. And I think that deserves due recognition. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge our living treasure, Barry Jones, for a lifetime of inspiration. And he's still the big picture man. What about a round of applause for Barry? To Barbara, thank you. That was wonderful, the insight and what you've done. And I look forward to bringing those themes together and how we can implement them at a state level at least, and hopefully soon at a national level as well. And Julie, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. We've all prospered from the Enlightenment. Remember when facts were stubborn and cherished, not alternate? Remember when that used to be dismissed as propaganda? Now, fake news gets a run. So we're in this time that is dangerous. It's taking us back to the 1930s, when you think it through. The pursuit of the obtainable truth used to be a noble cause. And I'm the first parliamentary secretary in Victoria, and I have had a wonderful opportunity, a privileged opportunity to meet so many of our scientists who are dedicated, who work incredibly hard and who are brilliant and world renowned. So I put enormous effort into trying to get people to see that this is a really significant time that we're in, because it's now, politics has become hyper-partisan and hyper-factionalised. And we need to find a way through that. And the only way through that is to look at what is factually accurate, evidence-based, and to be able to draw policy from those criteria again. So this is going to be a long battle. We now have media echo chambers. We now have major media outlets that are really just running a line rather than a debate. And so this is a challenging time. But nevertheless, we have to be optimistic. We have to keep mounting the case and try and eventually win the day. So I'm hoping that this time will pass and we will be able to move on. And I just wanted to set the scene that we've talked about the big picture, and one of the things that I've been trying to do is to show ordinary people where they fit in the big picture, because this becomes the proposition that I've been trying to do now for next year's the 20th year, where we established the Global Learning Village idea in Broadmeadows. So this was an idea to coordinate the 3 tiers of government, business and civil society to actually get a better result. And I want to acknowledge Gary Jungworth, who's here, because Gary was the councillor and he was the mayor when we came together to first do this. And Gary was critical in his role to be able to get the Hume City Council to come behind these ideas, because we didn't even have a public library. Just consider that for a moment. Right? We started this in 1999, we didn't have a public library. So the foundation of the Enlightenment. So what we did was we built a global learning centre. Then we realised that the digital divide would be the next big issue that we had to confront. So we went to Silicon Valley. We got Microsoft and Intel to come together, and Cisco Systems. And so we established an ideas lab, second in the world only to London. So I'm happy to get you the t-shirt, New York, London, Paris, Broadie. I want you to wear it with pride, okay? So we had the lowest uptake in tertiary education. So we established a multiversity. They're not going to build a sandstone uni out of Broadmeadows, and Victoria University was retreating from the Sunbury campus that it had as well. So we had to be innovative again, and what we did was we leveraged these partnerships and we used the technology that we had. So we established courses where you can get a degree or a postgraduate degree right in the Hume Global Learning Centre. So that got nominated for a Metropolis Award. went to 130 different cities around the world as a model for building smarter, healthier, better connected, sustainable communities. Because the idea that I was pursuing was that why do we keep building bigger police stations, grander courthouses and more prisons when insanity, as Einstein said, is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, instead of investing in attitude, education and opportunity, the attributes that largely determine where we all end up in life. And that was really one of the key ideas behind it and one of the drivers to get this done. So we were able to achieve that. And next year's the 20th year. I've been working on this with a whole range of different people who've been fantastic for their contribution. And it was about putting the partnerships together. John Brumby retired as the former Premier of Victoria, and the Labor Party recruited me to stand for the seat where I grew up. And it was just it was an expectation beyond the realm, it was beyond the realm of expectation, and a wonderful honour and a privilege. So my parents arrived in 1959 into Broadmeadows. So we actually were there before the Ford factory was produced. So just remember, the Broadmeadows family has outlasted Ford's production. Okay, I want you to know and understand that. So if you think back from my family's perspective, this was a wonderful opportunity that they'd come out of post-war Europe, and here was the chance to have regular work, a home of your own and the sun on your back. But Dad used to say he could never be homesick for Scotland because there were so many thistles. Okay, there was nothing there. And this was really what was going on. Mum used to leave her muddy shoes on the platform of the Broadmeadows railway station because there was no footpaths between our house and it was lined up with all the other workers, you know. So you take the shoes off, leave them there, and the boots would all be there, put on new shoes and go and try and get a job. That's what it was like. But they had this wonderful optimism, and they saw the opportunity. Well, I call them the grateful generation. And they inspired us in this way to actually say, come on, have a go, get yourselves organised, and give us your best. So that's the frame of reference that I came out of from our little 13 square housing commission home. And that was the attitudes that I kept pursuing, and the education that I got, and then the chance through journalism to learn more. So then as the MP for Broadmeadows, I started to put up different ideas about what could we actually achieve, and fed them through the caucus, and then came to the point of publishing Creating Opportunity Postcodes of Hope. So the idea was, how do we move the so-called postcodes of disadvantage again to be postcodes of hope, because Broadmeadows was going through deindustrialisation. And one of the most critical points that I wanted to address in this is that half Victoria's prisoners come from only 6% of postcodes. All right? I want to have an election on crime. Well, my argument is, what are we doing to address the causes of crime, which are well established? Poverty, unemployment, disconnection, to sum them up. So this became part of the idea that I was pursuing. And we know where these postcodes are. They won't be late-breaking news to anybody. They're at the end of the train lines, right? Broadmeadows, Frankston, Dandenong, Werribee. That's where we put all the poor people. They were the factory fodder. You've got to remember, multiculturalism was forged largely in the factory floors in the northern suburbs. And what's happened over time is these jobs have changed. We're going through deindustrialisation. So what have we actually done to address these issues? And it takes me back to my days in journalism. One of my very early interviews was with the retiring head of the Premier's Department, Major General Ken Green, the leading Mandarin in Victoria. And this is when the Kane government had just come to power, so around the 1980s, they came to power in 82, so it's around that time. And I asked him, what's been your greatest success? And he told me, I said, what's been your biggest failure in a generation of government? And he said Broadmeadows, right? So I was so gobsmacked I didn't say, well, thanks very much, that's where I've grown up and that's where I currently live. But I got him to explain it. And it was the lack of coordination, as you've addressed, Barbara. So I realised the forces that you have to beat are only the silo mentality, turf wars, institutional ego, bureaucratic inertia, and the political cycle. It's as simple as that, okay? So this is the background that I came from. Now, how do I play? I've got...
Just
so what
Alex, it's the
left click. So that's, just to give you the frame of reference, that's me in the sailor suit there. And so that's the house in Broadmeadows. So there are still nearly 2,000 of these 13 square homes, but they're on nearly a quarter of an acre of a block. 16 kilometres from the heart of the world's most livable city. We've got blue chip infrastructure, 2 train lines in, a spur into the Ford site. That's the size of a suburb. So I don't want to see that subdivided for more housing. I want to see that as an innovation hub. I want one of the universities to be based there. So I've taken this up directly with La Trobe University and RMIT University. They should have a major hub there, and we should make this, the centre for the north. Melbourne's north will be bigger in population than Adelaide on the projections in 13 years. That's all. So we're going through, think about the key propositions I've said here. So proximity to the centre, blue chip infrastructure, booming population. So if you haven't made the deduction, if you haven't bought in Broadmeadows now, you've missed, okay? I've just given you your best real estate tip, okay? So if you think back, this was Henry Bolte's jobs and growth strategy, right? So it was Ford in Broadmeadows, Holden in Dandenong. So they were our Motowns. So the feeder suburbs were Broadmeadows and Doveton on the other side. So if you think, and that's when the Housing Commission just built row upon row of pastel-coloured concrete homes, as I showed you. So this has been an issue that has progressed and become more complex. And as I say, particularly with the politics. So when we had the one-term coalition government, Matthew Guy, as planning minister, took money out of Broadmeadows for shovel-ready projects. All right, he gave it to Frankston, okay? They cut the TAFE, $20 million, and merged it with Bendigo, another marginal seat. They did a Sunbury out of Hume strategy. And this is what I'm saying about, this is totally against Jeff Kennett's strategy of council amalgamations, right? But it was all about the raw politics of it. How do we win a new seat that was going to be established called Sunbury? From the federal government, we've had managed decline. So we've had, if you remember the Thatcher government, what they did to England's north, led to social catastrophe there and the burning of Liverpool. Well, we've basically had managed decline to Melbourne's north because they're safe Labor seats. So I've picked this up. I hunted down under Senate estimates in the fine detail that there was an unspent $1.324 billion for the automotive transformation scheme. And I asked, how much of that are you going to reinvest? You know what the answer was? Nothing. They put money in for a jobs fair. So I tracked that down. Less than 5 ex-auto workers got full-time jobs out of that. So that's just gesture politics. So this is the folly of the times in which we live. And the juxtaposition to that was $80 billion was put into Adelaide for the demise of their auto industry. So what was that about? It was about marginal seats and Nick Xenophon and all that sort of thing. So here's the political twist. Population decrease has meant the Australian Electoral Commission has taken a seat out of Adelaide, and guess where they've put it? In Melbourne's north and west, right? The new seat of Fraser. So that's where the population growth is. So if it was, even as a political strategy, that's $80 billion of investment in the wrong spot, okay? I'll just put it that way. But we've got to get back to, the key point I want to go to though is about the national interest. How the self-interest, factional interest, runs first and second, and the national interest, trailed off a long time ago. That's unfortunately the political times that we live in, and that's what I'm saying, we must change at that level. So Ford's reinvested hundreds of millions of dollars in innovation. That's the good news. It's now their centre of excellence for Asia Pacific. So I'm trying to build on what the opportunities are. I also have CSL. So they're our leader in the sector. I think a share price of about $200 these days, and they make life-saving blood products and export them globally from Broadmeadows. So then we have another company, an Irish company. Our first Green Star rated company is called Kingspan. and they're out of Dublin. So they've arrived, and they're in the suburb of Somerton, and they're making environmentally friendly insulation and exporting to Asia Pacific. So what I'm trying to do is fast track through deindustrialisation to advanced manufacturing. What are the new industries and what are the new jobs? So let me go on to the next one. I don't want to play this again. How do I get on to the? Can you get on to the next one? Yeah. Okay. So there's the Ford site. So it gives you, I just want to put that. It's the size of a suburb. Ford are taking care of the ground itself at the moment, and because they've got to get rid of. We're doing this with the EPA just to make sure that it comes back to the right quality, but that's a huge strategically placed opportunity. Ford own it. Now I tracked this down in Hansard back in the 50s, and there was a contribution by Jack Galbally in the upper house, and he made the point that there was never really disclosed what the deal was. But you can understand Balti's trying to attract a major company, and so Ford come, but they weren't at that time, only months earlier they said that they weren't going to build what is now the Upfield train line, but not only did they build it, they built the spur into the site. So I wanted the government to negotiate to see if we either buy it or do a negotiation before Ford ceased its manufacturing. But anyway, that time has passed. The government bought the Fisherman's Bend site and made that a huge centre there, and got the University of Melbourne's Innovation Hub to be put in there as well. I have no argument about that. That's a great idea. But what I'm also saying is for the north, I think here's the opportunity to do the same, given the population growth. So that's the attempt to get business in, but to get them not to do gesture politics, but to actually get a commitment and to see what further jobs we can get. Now I'll just show you. Oh no, here we go. Now, this is what I was saying about the housing issue. So one of the things has been that we've had people who have had the imagination to dream of a better future for their families and the courage to cross the world to pursue it, to come to Broadmeadows. This is where you get your start in the land of opportunities, my late dad always said. And he was right, it's been fantastic. But it's now about how do we actually unlock the value of the area, but do it in a way where we get public, private, social housing. And one of the points that you made, Barbara, absolutely resonated with me, because if you see the old homes, they were built in the 50s, they're well past their use-by date, but they always had a big backyard. I mean, I'd kick football until dusk with my younger brother up and down there, and you had plenty of in an area to play and all of that. It was fantastic from that proposition. Now we've got these cheaply built in the time 1950s homes being replaced by the private sector building cheap homes, and they're all repetitive again. They're double-storey, double-fronted, cookie-cutter propositions, and they've got a little front yard and no backyard. So this loss of space is an issue right now that we're trying to address, and trying to do that through the Broadmeadows Revitalisation Board in connection with the Victorian Government and the Council and those who do want to come, because the market is coming, make no mistake. So there will be big investments there because of those key drivers that I mentioned before: proximity, blue chip infrastructure and booming population. But we can change the past and come up with something better. So I just wanted to give you a proof of the concept that we can do this. Of course we can. We've got the will and the wit in the nous, and it's a matter of how we actually make sure that nobody is left behind, that we do get that balance right, and that'll be the critical test, and that's something that we're looking to deal with. So I keep trying to promote these ideas, and that's my challenge and my duty and my privilege, so I really appreciate it. So that's I'll leave copies of this Creating Opportunity Postcodes of Hope there for you, and copies of the Broadmeadows Revitalisation Board's report. So Premier Dan Andrews created a new department for suburban development, put Lily D'Ambrosio in charge of that, and she appointed me to chair the Revitalisation Board, and you've got that report there. But I've also, you said I was the man with a plan, I've got another plan. Okay, so this is building smarter cities, stronger communities, and this goes to the idea that I'm landing it on is to try and get Unity tickets and to get a better result from the building of the rail link to the Melbourne airport. There's $5 billion earmarked by the Australian government, $5 billion by the Victorian government, and they'll go to the private sector for another $5 billion. So that's one anchor. The other one that I'm looking at is the missing link, the northeast link in our road network. So that's another multi-billion-dollar project. And then I'm saying what we really need to have is a city deal for Melbourne's north and west, so that we aggregate the assets and create better opportunities, new industries and jobs. And all I'm really asking for is the same fair go deal that Sydney's west got from the federal government. Because Treasurer Tim Pallas will tell you that Victoria gets about 1/10 of what we're due on our infrastructure spend. So that's the next idea that I'm promoting. I've got some media coverage on that. And the other point that I'm arguing is that we can have the Arden precinct as the linchpin between the north and the west. So this is something the Victorian government is pursuing as well. And this is where we do want to have a smart city. So that's about how do we use the new technology and how do we revitalise this critical point. And then I'm saying then we have the Parkville precinct, which is genuinely world class. We don't, in medical research, we are right there. And how do we leverage that again to create the platform and to deliver on that? So I made the pitch when President Obama, I saw him make his final State of the Union address. And remember, he challenged America to a new moonshot, the quest to cure cancer. So I immediately wrote an article and advocated for the idea that Australia should offer to partner. Long story short, the Premier went to Boston and was able to invite Joe Biden. So he was put in charge of mission control by President Obama. If you remember the backstory there, his son Beau died of brain cancer the year before, and that was his stated reason for not contesting the Democratic nomination for the 2016 election in America. So Joe Biden came out for the opening of the billion-dollar jewel in our medical research crown, the Victorian Comprehensive Cancer Centre, and his greatest boast off that was the ability to have access to the case studies of 60,000 patients who were cancer sufferers from Victoria, and have it in a way where their privacy was protected, but to mine that data. So this became a critical proposition because you compare Victoria's population to America's population, we've got a better system. So that's the value there. So I went on a flight as soon as I could back to the US, went to MD Anderson, the world's largest comprehensive cancer center in Texas, and all the way up to Washington, and looking to pave the way for a series of MOUs. And then, about 2 months ago, was in the US Embassy in Canberra, and we're looking at an Australia-wide proposition on that. And this now looks like there'll be at least 11 countries involved. So the concept behind that is how do we get the best and brightest connected? How do we share the research? And the idea is that that will fast track breakthroughs and discoveries and better treatments. So this is what we're looking to leverage, is our great assets here and our innovation. And as I say to the sector, because we have to do this, we shouldn't take it for granted, because right now China's building a place the size of Singapore for medical research. So the next thing will be they'll go around and they'll get the best and brightest people and say, come and work with us, here's the state-of-the-art facilities, fulfill your destiny, get your cures. That will be, you know, our intellectual property, and we'll be buying it back at a premium. So we're trying to address that with our medical research plan, and through Jill Hennessy as the health minister, and Dan Andrews, not just as Premier but also as a former health minister as well, is driving that in a really big and bold way. And you've heard the recent announcement about having the underground tunnel to connect up the suburban networks. So that's the other big plan that we're putting forward for this election. There'll be more to come, but I just wanted to give you a feel for for what the thinking is, how do we manage Melbourne becoming a metropolis? How do we take care of the human factor? What are the new industries and jobs? How do we fast track through deindustrialisation? And critically as well, what are the jobs for blue collar workers? How are we going to manage that? And what does that mean? And how do we make sure that nobody's left behind? So I've provided that. I hope you see the opportunity in creating opportunity, Postcodes of Hope. Thank you.
Thank you.